Hello everyone and welcome to the Bad Spot on the Fall Session 0 for my new campaign where I'll be setting sail to play Ironsworn in the Sundered Isles. Now, I did sort of a live Session 0 on stream with a bunch of you, but it became much more of a freewheeling ideas session with a lot of you pitching in some really great stuff. But in terms of establishing anything concrete, I only really laid out what truths I'd be exploring in this campaign, and in addition to a few other loose world building bits and pieces, but I didn't get much into specifics. Well, I took all those ideas and fragments of ideas and I have shaped them into something vaguely approaching a world and campaign framework, and I am here now presenting to you my Session 0. I'll go through the process step by step, but I won't do it in real time and read everything in detail. I won't list all the options available or do the oracle rolls one by one for brevity's sake, but by the end, you will know everything there is to know about my version of the Sundered Isles and also get to meet the character I'll be playing. If you want to follow along and you have the Sundered Isles guidebook, we are starting on page 68 with the section Prepare to Set Sail. Okay, first up is tone. Broadly speaking, I want this campaign to be more of a romp, full of swashbuckling action, but also with elements of horror and intrigue in there too. And I want it to feel different from my Starforge campaign, which at times had quite a solemn tone. And for reasons I'll get into when I talk more about my character, I think this will be a more social game interspersed with some hijinks, maybe some capers and also shenanigans. Content-wise, I will keep it PG-13 with occasional R-rated moments, but I won't spring any of this on you. I'm a huge proponent of using safety tools at the table, and whilst this is a solo game and I'm the only player to consider, I will continue to be mindful of my audience as I did with my Starforge campaign, and will post content warnings at the start of each episode like this. I'll also have them listed in the episode description below. Okay, first choice we have to make. We have to select our realm. We have a choice of where to set our story, and I have chosen the Seafaring Realm. In this realm, the Sundered Isles lie within vast and perilous seas. No one knows the true extent of the isles. Untold numbers of them are scattered like broken shards across these equatorial waters. This is the default setting when playing Sundered Isles, and I want to showcase the game on this show, and I think that choosing the Seafaring Realm will allow me to use as many of the new oracles, assets and features without having to alter them or bend them around the fiction. Also, I think it's just the coolest of the three options. That's just basic science. Like in any Ironsworn campaign, the next thing to do is to choose our truths. It's an exercise where we set the tone and background for our game by deciding the nature of the various aspects of our version of the world. Once these are established, we will have the framework of our setting sketched out. We're going to work through the 11 categories here, where we'll be presented with 3 truths about each, and we can either choose, roll randomly, or make our own, and that choice becomes true about our version of the Sundered Isles. Now, I chose these on stream using a mixture of dice rolls and picks, but I will now dive into my choices in more depth. First up, the Sundering. How did the Isles earn their name? Of the 3 options, I went with eons ago, a vast cataclysm shattered continents. Lands broke apart in an apocalyptic disaster, powerful cities fell, fire, lava and ash scoured what remained. The isles, scattered like broken shards, are the vestiges of these once great lands, the gravestones of a fallen dominion. Life eventually returned to this realm, but the wounds do not fully heal. Now, this truth is very closely tied to the second, which concerns relics, what remains of lost or fallen people. I chose an ancient civilization of unfathomable power left its mark upon these isles. These people unlock secrets beyond our understanding. The ruins marking their legacy are places of unnatural construction, confounding mechanisms, and cryptic relics. So tying these two together, I have decided I'd like my version of the Sundered Isles to have a prehistory, in that there was an ancient civilization that ruled this world, but they were swallowed by the sea, much like our myth of Atlantis. Some think it's just folklore, a myth. Others believe these peoples and their civilization really existed and still exist in the trenches on the ocean floors. Scholars dedicate their life's work to uncovering the secrets of these peoples, whilst the more opportunistic seek to plunder what remains for their own gain. This civilization was called the Terion, but the people of the Sundered Isles refer to them simply as the Sunken. Next up, modern era. What is the state of technology? I have chosen for my story to take place in an age of industry. The winds of change are upon us. Some of these innovations inspire awe. Flying machines that sail among the clouds, metal diving bells that plumb the greatest depths, and mechanical limbs of intricate design that replace what was lost. But industry is also an insatiable fire. Mines, smelters, and factories reshape our lands to feed those flames. And to slightly refine this idea, our story takes place during the very early stages of this industrial age, and there is a real gold rush feel to a lot of the technological advances. There are multiple factions trying to get a piece of it to try and develop these technologies for their own ends, which means that this gold rush is also sort of an arms race, as the destructive potential of some of these new technologies draws the interest of multiple factions with intentions each more nefarious than the last. I'm also borrowing something from one of the other truths, which is from the Age of Wonders, which says, "A few commanders even count iron automatons given life by improbable technologies among their crew." I just think this is cool, so I'm having that. These automatons are exceptionally rare, but I'm saying they exist in my world. Next up, iron vowels. What is the significance of iron and sworn vowels? I've gone for some see iron vowels as a vestige of a more superstitious age, but the tradition persists. Our forebears bound their promises to the strength and permanence of iron. Today, self-avowed Ironsworn respect this tradition by affirming their resolve with the time-honoured phrase, "By iron I vow." Even those who forego an iron totem say the words to lend solemnity to a promise, setting themselves on an honour-bound course, wherever it may lead. Now, I think this ties nicely into this being a dawn of a new era, right? The old ways are dying, traditions are being forgotten, and I like that there is a distinction between those who believe in this and those who don't. I think that's an interesting conceit, and it's one that I've not really explored in any of my games so far. Next up, navigation. How are people and places connected? Now, listen up, because this might be the most important truth of this whole exercise, so pay attention. I chose, we rely on the ancient traditions and knowledge of the star-marked to navigate these perilous seas. The star-marked have an uncanny sense of wind and tide and bear the history of their travels as beautiful and intricate tattoos etched in phosphorescent ink. Some of the places and passages pioneered by the star-marked are now common knowledge, inscribed in charts and travelled widely. Others are coveted secrets or lost to time and strife. The skills of the star-marked make them highly valued as ship's navigators, and some seek to exploit them to their own ends. So this is true, the star-marked exist in my world and have uncanny navigational senses, or some may say supernatural navigational powers. And the key thing about this truth in my world is that they have all but died out and have been replaced by navigational methods we'd recognise from the Age of Sail, but they haven't quite died out completely. More on that later. Next, empires. How great is the threat of colonisation and conquest? I chose the Sundered Isles are free from imperial control, for now. The empires have only a minor presence. Their outposts are isolated and pose little threat, but there are resources and riches to be exploited, and freedom is a fragile thing. Even now, imperial agents are said to be among us, working in the shadows, planting the seeds of conquest. So I'm not really interested in exploring colonialist narratives, even fictional ones, so there is no big empire at the heart of my story, tempting though it is to have a bunch of imperialist bastards I can stick it to every session. I think it's far more interesting to have multiple nascent factions with imperial ambitions who are lusting for power, and as I alluded to earlier, there are factions looking to win an arms race that's been brought on by this sudden boom in industry. But these factions are kept in check because of piracy. What influence do pirates wield? A burgeoning pirate nation wields great influence. The marauder clans sail under the command of the Dread Court, a conclave of 8 veteran pirates whose shrewd tactics positioned this nation of cutthroats as a rising power. Now, how big a part this pirate nation will play in my story, who knows, but this is true. I really like the idea of defining the interests and personalities of these 8 veteran pirate captains, though. I think that could be really cool. Next up, religion. What is the role of faith? Our faith is as diverse as our people. Many have no religion or offer an occasional prayer out of habit. Others pay homage to the gods of our ancestors as a way of connecting to their roots. Some idolize the natural order of the world and see the divine in the ebb and flow of the tides or the whirling dance of the stars. Then there are those who see this diversity as imperfection, who seek only to bend the world to their righteous will. I'm not sure religion will play a huge part in my story, but I have chosen this truth to give me the scope to basically define it in whatever way it might be appropriate. Now, I usually choose the God is dead option in all my games, so this represents something like, I don't know, personal growth, I guess. Next up, magic. What is the impact of supernatural forces? Now, this is the only truth that I'm going to change from what I came up with on the live stream. Initially, I went all out magic, but I have actually dialed it back a bit and gone with magic is rare and mysterious. The Isles lie at the nexus of the new and the old, science and superstition, the known and the inexplicable. This collision of realities is a powerful but chaotic force, and rare folk can manipulate these unstable realities to cast spells and perform rites. In some cultures, mystics are respected. In others, they are feared or even outcast. And the reason I've dialed this back is because I'd like to link this truth to one of the other truths, despite it seeming unlikely, because I think that magic is about to play a huge role in the Age of Industry, because as various factions compete in this arms race, I think that some are trying to expedite the process using magic. And if magic is slightly less prevalent, then that adds an extra layer. Who can secure the support of these magic users, and what will people risk to do so? Next up, beasts. What is the nature of extraordinary creatures? I chose, because of course I did, here there be monsters. We are trespassers in a cursed realm of beasts. Monstrous lizards stalk the inland wilds, flying reptiles with wings the size of topsails dwell in cliffside nests. Giant sharks and serpents cruise the coastal waters in search of prey. The much-feared kraken, larger than the greatest warship, lurks in fathomless depths. And some ancient beasts are too monstrous, too horrible for even our worst imaginings. I want monsters dialed up to 11, because, frankly, who doesn't want that? Now, the last of our 11 truths is horrors. What dreadful forces haunt the Sundered Isles? And I chose, the damned and the dead are a plague upon the Isles. We live in accursed times. The drowned and the buried do not rest. Tortured spirits hunt for retribution. Uncounted islands are blighted by dark forces. Cities and villages lie abandoned and forsaken, lost to a malevolent tide. We keep watch, craft wards, and offer prayer to keep the horrors at bay, but it is no use. They are coming. Again, up to 11, I want horror in this game. I want ghosts, I want vampires, I want cursed fleets, zombies, all of it. And I'll be using the cursed die mechanic to generate a lot of that. The cursed die is an extra d10 you add to certain oracle rolls, and if you roll a 10 on that cursed die, you consult a separate oracle of cursed results. Now I'm going to do that, but I am going to up the odds a little. The guidebook suggests that if you want to up the odds, then maybe say the results are cursed on a 9 or a 10, or maybe even an 8, 9 or a 10. But I'm going to say any odd number on the cursed die will generate a cursed result. So I'm making it a 50-50 coin flip because I really, really want to lean into this part of the setting. So those were our truths. Now it's time to set our factions. So based on what we established in our truths, we are going to bring a couple of factions into our world and sketch them out a little. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is this arms race, because whilst this is a much bigger picture thing, it's happening all throughout the Sundered Isles, I think that it might now have reached our part of the world. There's a pre-generated list of factions in the guidebook, and one of them fits kind of perfectly here, and that is the Ironmongers. They are a guild of shipbuilders and arms manufacturers who supply their destructive wares to the highest bidder. They secretly incite wars to expand their fortune. Now that description is kind of spot on. It's pretty much exactly what we need, but I think we can expand a little bit on the name, because I think maybe Ironmongers is what the guild is called informally, but their full, more grandiose, more self-important title is the League of Smoke and Steel. Now, whilst their wider operations are taking place in the more populous areas of the Sundered Isles, I think there is a branch of the League of Smoke and Steel in our local area, and they are definitely up to no good. Also in the list of factions are the Ebb Tide, who are a covert insurgency of spies and saboteurs. They seek to cripple imperial ambitions from within and use trained gulls to carry vital messages to collaborators. So this is interesting, and this works in direct opposition to the League, right? If they are developing some technology in the area for some faction or factions, then the Ebb Tide would want to know about it. They would be actively seeking it out and also probably trying to sabotage it. And I love a bit of espionage. It's not really something I've explored in any of my games before. So these are the two factions at work in this area. Now, in terms of their faction relationship, it's pretty simple and it's largely one way. The Ebb Tide is manoeuvring against the League of Smoke and Steel. Now, this might seem overly simplistic, just two factions and a straightforward connection, but I think that there are some really interesting possibilities amongst that rather simple relationship. And as the campaign is going to be based a little bit more around intrigue, I think it would be a lot of fun to discover a lot more as we go. Okay, now the fun part. Who am I going to play in this campaign? I know I want to play a very different sort of character this time out, so let's dig into the overall concept. I have leaned more into the idea of playing a charisma-based character, a chancer, a smooth talker, socially very confident, somewhere between Lando Calrissian and Flynn Rider. I think they're also younger, Caucasian male in his early 20s, and I like the idea that he hasn't quite figured out who the bad guys are yet. He's sort of on the run from responsibility and hasn't had to pick a side to fight for or a cause to believe in. He's self-centered, he's arrogant, and he is conceited, but he is also charming, erudite, and rakish. He has spent most of his adult life island hopping, drifting between towns, charming his way into the good graces of the locals before pushing his luck a little too far and being chased out of town, and then on to the next town. He charms, he cheats, he steals, rinse and repeat. But whilst he doesn't seem to care about anything of the world beyond the end of his own nose, he only does so to protect himself, and I'm sure that if circumstances were to arise and he found himself having to pick a side between right and wrong, he would do the right thing. Probably. The proof of this, and perhaps maybe the only proof that he has something approaching a conscience, is that he loves cheating and stealing from the rich. He loves infiltrating elite social circles and taking them for all they're worth, and he doesn't do anything with the riches. He'll just as happily toss a priceless jewel taken from around the neck of an heiress to a street urchin as keep it for himself. He just enjoys tormenting the upper classes. One detail I did roll up on stream is that he has inherited a dreadful curse, and this is also something he has not yet faced or contended with in his life to date. My character's curse means he has a terrible habit of being shipwrecked and a terrible habit of often being the sole survivor of these shipwrecks. And this curse is very closely tied to a secret he guards. On his wrist, hidden beneath fabric wrapping, is a tattoo etched in strange phosphorescent ink. It's hard to define as it is clearly unfinished. And he's always had this tattoo. It's been with him for as long as he can remember. From a certain angle, it seems to resemble a serpent, but then not quite. It's hard to determine. What convinces him he is cursed and is tied to his tattoo is that whenever he has found himself shipwrecked, two things have immediately preceded it. The moon wraith has been full, and his tattoo has glowed powerfully. Now, the most important thing about this character is that he's always suspected it, but doesn't quite know it for sure. But he is the last star-marked. The tattoo on his wrist is some partial map to somewhere, but where, who knows. But given how his life has gone at sea so far, he's not in that much of a hurry to find out. Dare he unlock the secret to try and break the curse? He may have to. Next, we need to pick two assets, and like I said, we are going for a social character, so where better to start than with Socialite, which is a new asset from the Sundered Isles. Now, this asset suggests a character from high society, but our character isn't from high society. He just loves pretending he is, so that's how I'm going to frame this asset. I'm also going to pick Scoundrel, which is an asset from Starforged and pairs very nicely, I think. Now, I know there are more Sundered Isles assets to pick from, but I wanted to demonstrate how easy it is to mix and match the assets from each version of the game. Each asset has 3 abilities associated with it, and you begin with the first ability on the cards. As we accrue experience, we can unlock the others, but these are the initial abilities we start with. For the final asset, I did initially think and talk about on stream about having the Chattering Skull companion, but the more I thought about it, the less it fit with what I was coming up with. But you know what does fit? A monkey. Yes, my character has a monkey companion, and I think that having read the abilities, which are all based around said monkey causing mischief and our hero then finding the unintended opportunities or consequences in the chaos created, it's just too fun to pass up. And I think the monkey companion will be a popular pick for people playing the Sundered Isles because the way it's written is just so much fun. So we've talked about our character. How about we meet him? Now, I asked the wonderfully talented artist and all-round good egg, Joshua Meehan, lead artist on Ironsworn, Starforged and Sundered Isles, to bring my character to life, and I hope you'll agree he has done a wonderful job. Everybody, meet Gideon Finch. Socialite, scoundrel, scourge of high society. You'll see him here trying to talk his way out of his latest scrape with his loyal companion, a red-handed tamarin called Lorenzo. I love this piece so much. Joshua is unbelievable at what he does, and he has absolutely nailed this one. Next, we need a background vow, and this one's going to be very simply lift the family curse. And having learned my lesson from Starforged, I have sketched out some loose goals within that vow, so I can give it a little more structure because, boy, could I have done with that last time. Okay, let's talk stats, obviously the sexiest part of all this. The standard stat array in Ironsworn is 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. So 1 strong stat, 2 average stats, and 2 weak stats. This is what I use for Luna and also for Tio in my Ironsworn mini-campaign. Now, when I began this channel and the Starforged campaign, I used an alternate stat array for Archer of 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, because it being a solo campaign and only having played the original Ironsworn to that point, I remembered how brutal it could be, so I wanted to skew a little more towards success. But what I actually found was Starforged is actually much more forgiving, and frankly, using that stat array for Archer skewed things way too much towards success, and I found myself fudging dice rolls quite often, but fudging them down from strong hits to weak hits, because there were so many times where I just changed strong hit after strong hit, and the repeated success just wasn't very interesting for the story or interesting for you at home. So with all that said, I'm going to use another different custom stat array for Gideon, and that falls somewhat between the two. He has an edge of 2, a heart of 3, an iron of 1, shadow of 2, and a wits of 2. So we have 1 strong stat, 1 weak stat, and then all the others are average. So a slight buff over the default, but nowhere near as much of a buff as Archer got. Now our next step is to take command. Does Gideon captain a ship? Is he a member of a crew under someone else's command? Well, no, Gideon absolutely does not ever want to get on a ship because it doesn't tend to go well for him. But this is a game set in the age of sail, I hear you say, and isn't that contrary to the point of this whole endeavour? Well, yeah, it is, but something tells me Gideon is going to have to set sail soon, no matter what. Next up, we are going to chart our course. Here we're going to establish the geography of where our adventure starts, and we do that by making a navigational chart, which is basically a map of our starting region. There's some steps to this, so let's go through them. First, we need to pick our starting region. There's 3 choices: the Myriads, the Margins, or the Reaches. The Myriads are the most settled and populous, the Reaches are less so. We're going to go in the middle and start in the Margins. Then we are going to set our faction influence. Looking at the factions we've established earlier, we work out who is in control, who is the dominant force in this area. And what I like about what we established is that both the League of Smoke and Steel and the Ebb Tide are both sort of secretly at work here. Neither is drawing attention to themselves. And I like the idea that in the Margins, there is no dominant faction. There is a little bit of a frontier feel, a little bit of a lawless feel perhaps, and we'll flesh that out shortly. Now let's reveal our islands. The Margins asks us to have 3 islands, and I have sketched these out using the results rolled up in the oracles. I'll talk you through these now. I love doing this, by the way. I love maps, and I love rolling on random tables, so this was very much my bag. This is the Ember Strait, where we will begin our adventure. We have 3 islands. Up in the northwest, we have Navini, a medium-sized island with rolling, desolate plains of meagre grassland and sandy dunes. It's sparsely inhabited, littered with ancient ruins of the sunken. In the northeast, we have the Barb, a small island consisting of low-lying wetlands and infested swamps. And this is where we can find the forsaken settlement of Rotwood Mire, one of this region's notable features. And in the southeast is where Gideon will begin his adventure on the island of New Harlock, with verdant, rugged terrain, thick jungles, and picturesque shorelines. Located on the northern shore of New Harlock is Port Emberlyn, a bustling city home to several thousand people. It is teeming with life, with comings and goings through the port. It is the perfect place for someone like Gideon to lose themselves. Another notable feature can be found in Port Emberlyn. There is a palatial manor, a remnant perhaps of some deposed monarchy, but now used as a meeting place for the region's guilds and power brokers, and perhaps those from further afield too. Now, we talked about faction control in this region and talked about there being no dominant faction, and whilst that's true, Port Emberlyn is certainly run by a local authority, and that local authority is headed by our connection. This is the final step of this stage, defining an important, independent character not only for the region but for Gideon. Throughout our story, we will interact with this character and develop a relationship with them. Our connection is Sabrina McCabe, governess of Port Emberlyn. Now, we'll describe her in more details and flesh her out when we actually meet her, but mechanically, this relationship needs a rank, and that rank is dangerous. So what's her connection to the factions in play? Well, not only is Sabrina McCabe the governess of Port Emberlyn, she is also secretly an agent of the Ebb Tide, recently alerted to the presence of the League of Smoke and Steel in the Ember Strait. Now, the final step of this Session 0 is to set the scene and establish the inciting incident that gets this whole story moving, but I'm going to roll that into the beginning of our first episode, so I'm afraid you're going to have to wait and see what trouble Gideon is going to have to get himself out of. That first episode will be on the way shortly, and I cannot wait to dig into it. Just up top, I am going to say that I'm moving away from the 24 episode seasons I did for Starforged, because that was just a bit too hard to sustain. So I'll be doing Sundered Isles in smaller blocks of 10 or 12 parts, and you'll get a campaign episode every 2 weeks. So that's what to expect. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, and do check out the Bad Spot Patreon if you want to support the channel and support the work I do, like all these lovely people. Until next time, it's farewell and safe passage.